If I were to summarize the events in chapter 5 and 6, I could simplify it down to a few words, something like the beginnings of tragedy. To give you a bit of context, we learned in the previous chapters that the second Herrscher has been constantly stalking Kiana in her dreams, planting seed of doubt and hatred to destroy her mental stability and eventually trying to take control of her entire being. But so far, Kiana has been able to withstand these attacks, perhaps because of her sheer determination. But at the end of chapter 6, things change very abruptly. We can visibly see that Kiana loses complete control of herself. So, what happened? To explain, we need to talk about what's been going on with Kiana up to this point in the story. Within the past several months in Kiana's life, a lot has happened. She's witnessed Mei getting injured in order to protect her. Then she has to deal with a barrage of mental attacks from a mysterious figure that seems to know more about her than Kiana herself. Then she goes on to experience a literal betrayal by Bronya because of Cecelia's control, which eventually leads to her helplessly watching from the sideline as Mei and Wendy gets kidnapped right in front of her eyes. Then we have Wendy, who was just another girl like Kiana, getting murdered right before Kiana was able to save her. And if this wasn't already enough, Kiana's been looking for her missing father for the past 4 years with absolutely zero clues, not to mention growing up her entire life without the support of her motherly figure, Cecelia. I mean, at this point, it's fair to say that it's rather surprising that she was able to keep sane, and she did do a magnificent job up until the events of chapter 5 and 6. If we think about the overall context of the story in chapter 5 and 6, there's something really obvious going on, yet it's pretty shrouded in complication. It's like there's an elephant in the room, but not only are we trying to ignore the existence of the elephant, but we're actually casting smokescreen to further exacerbate the problem. What I'm talking about is the fact that Kiana understands that everything she experiences and witnesses in these chapters is a virtual memory, but she chooses to ignore this fact because she wants to live in this utopia of fake illusions and dreams. So basically what happens is that Teresa goes into a virtual historical memory bank of sorts in order to find a way to cure Bronya's conditions, and Kiana just happened to follow Teresa into this virtual memory space, going back to Siberia in 2000 when the second Honkai eruption actually happened. Now obviously going into this, Kiana realized something was weird, and she eventually found out that everything and anything that she sees in this place is virtual and fake. But just out of curiosity, she progresses just to understand what really happened to her father and mother in the second eruption. Eventually, Kiana would group up with Siegfried and Teresa of the past to try to take down the second Herrscher before Cecelia gets deployed, but sadly they fail miserably, and with no other choice left, Jigsaw ends up sending Cecelia to deal with the second Herrscher, even though she was still recovering from giving birth to Kiana. So at least so far, Kiana is still very aware that everything she is seeing is still just a memory. But what happens next starts causing some problems. You see, Kiana slowly becomes too invested in her emotions within this virtual world, partly because of the fake reunification between herself and Siegfried, her dad, and also literally seeing her mother for the first time inside of this virtual world. I mean, if you remember all the things we mentioned before about all the crap that Kiana had to endure her entire life, who wouldn't get emotional? So slowly, Kiana begins to accept this world of false dreams as part of her reality. Then things get even worse because Cecelia and Kiana are eventually led into the Babylon labs, but within this tower, Kiana finds a very peculiar diary. Now this diary does give some context as to what was going on in this facility, but there is something else in this diary that stands out to Kiana.
心の中で唱えれば、すべての願いを叶えてくれる。Ich liebe dich.
Now, for whatever reason, every time that Kiana would chant this magical spell, everything ends up coming true, like having intimate moments or playing video games with Cecelia. But the weird thing is, every time it does come true, it's almost as if the memory space is beginning to alter its reality. And this essentially becomes the nail in the coffin for Kiana. You see, in the very beginning, she knew this was all an illusion. Then, because meeting with her parents, she becomes too invested and she can't control her emotions. And the storytelling in chapter 5 and 6 clearly show this in a progressive manner. Now, if that wasn't already crazy enough, at the end of chapter 6, we can see what actually breaks Kiana. And it's the moment when this beautiful dream of hers comes crashing down. Because at the very end, Kiana abruptly wakes up after Teresa finds her in the basement of St. Freya High School, questioning what she's doing here. Kiana is obviously confused. Then out of nowhere, Fuha breaks in and begins to tell Kiana that all the things she just experienced were actually not even a virtual space. Rather, it was the second Herrscher using fake memories and visions just to attack her mentally, and that she's been standing still this entire time in the basement of St. Freya High School. So if you really think about it, everything Kiana experienced, or even the things that she thought she knew, like this entire thing being a virtual memory space, it was all a lie. So Kiana now completely freaks out, and under the directives of Otto, Fuha captures Kiana and escapes to Jigsaw HQ. Obviously, there are many unanswered questions, like why the second Herrscher is even inside Kiana's consciousness, or what Otto is trying to do with Kiana, which will all eventually be explained in the later chapters. But this emotional struggle and roller coaster of Kiana, particularly in chapters 5 and 6, I feel is something a lot of players overlooked or maybe even forgotten altogether. Because if I really think about everything that happened previously and what is happening in chapter 5 and 6, I personally think this is definitely the beginning of the hardships and sadness that we will experience throughout Kiana in the future. But that's just my opinion. Now, after Kiana gets taken away, Teresa asks Himeko to transfer Bronya onto the battleship Hyperion to do some surgery, and also to prepare for their deployment to face against the Jigsaw HQ and to rescue Kiana. Will they be successful? We'll find out next time. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like and support my channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.